Thanks, Renee. Thank you so much. And I would just say I'm going to screen share and please let me know, if there's anything that I'm saying that's not clear as I go through this. And Renee, you can feel free to interrupt me. I know people might be asking questions in the chat or whatever, and that would be fantastic. The other thing I would just say before I launch in is that, I have the privilege of working in multisystemic therapy. So in that role, and Renee's been an was in MST for years and years as well. We really are lucky to be able to get into multiple systems in youth lives. So some of the things that I'll be talking about, I know are not relevant in every one of your jobs. And so just of course, as always, take what you like and leave the rest. If something doesn't apply to your current role, that's no problem, but hopefully you'll get something out of this brief presentation today. So, one of our treatment principles in multisystemic therapy is to really utilize sequence of events to identify how we can make some changes in the lives of the youth that we work with who are often referred for aggressive behavior. And so that's what I'm going to be speaking about specifically today. But really, a lot of this can be relevant for aggressive behavior towards themselves or others, um, and aggression within the home. So please generalize as you see fit, what I'm going to talk about today. And so, one of the things I find most helpful to do is before you gather a sequence of events of an incident of aggression with the youth, is to really give the rationale. Because I found when working with families and caregivers, sometimes I'm getting involved after a big incident that, um, ended up in police involvement or somebody got injured. And so systems got involved with the family after a big blowout that happened. And usually there's lots of blowouts with the kids that we work with. And so it can be really difficult. People don't want to go back through one of the worst days of their lives, right? And go through the sequence of with you. So being able to give the rationale for like, we need to understand how things go wrong so that we can figure out how to make things go better. And so we're not just going over negative things to go over negative things. There's a very clear purpose to it. And then the other thing that I find really helpful is to really normalize that it's very, very common for us to get stuck in fixed interaction patterns. And then, that there's no judgment around that. We're here to figure out how to help things go better. Um, and then the other thing is, especially working with adults that are supporting youth, is that, oftentimes when we start working with families in MST, the parents are like, fix him, fix her. They're the problem. And so it takes a delicate, approach to be able to shift to looking at what can the adults around the child do to support them in changing the sequence of events and how they end up. Because developmentally, of course, and all of our kids, I know I've heard somebody here from DD, so developmentally, we have to take into account where our clients are at and not have developmentally inappropriate expectations for what a youth can do to change a sequence of events. And so, very often in my work with adolescents, we're really working through the caregivers to affect behavioral change because oftentimes our kids are just not in a place developmentally or buy-in wise to really be on board with changing their behavior. And so this is, hard work. It takes some effort and some trial and error to make changes in the sequences that get stuck. I have found when I'm going through sequences with families that could be really helpful to like talk about as if you're watching a show on Netflix. I mean, when I started, I was talking about, rewind the VCR, but now, if you're watching a show on Netflix or something, how to stop and rewind it so we can really go through a scene as if we were watching it live and really understand how the scene played out, so that we can like then come up with an alternative scene and rewrite the script and have a take two. Um, so that going forward, it doesn't end up with the outcome of aggression, or if it is aggression, it's not so high level that systems need to get involved, etc., or anybody gets hurt. And so the other thing we really want to be doing is looking around to see are the adults that the child has in their life that can be enlisted to help the child change the sequence of events. And ideally, those are sustainable adults in the child's life. So when you are no longer involved, people in surrounding the adult know how to, coach them through changing the sequences of interactions. The other thing too, you may need to separate people to gather sequences of events from multiple participants. For safety reasons, you may not want to go through the sequences of events with the parent and child, for example, because it might just lead to another recurrence of aggression. So we definitely, want to be making sure we're not making a bad situation worse. So think strategically around how you gather sequences of events, but ensuring that you're getting multiple perspectives. So if you're talking with grandma who was there, when a situation unfolded with the youth, being clear, we're not seeking secrets. We are wanting to gather multiple perspectives so that if another participant shares what they observed, we're finding points of agreement and things to work on together. The other thing that's important to keep in mind when you're gathering sequences of events, if you suspect that something was reportable to children's services or adult protective services in the case of like an elderly family member or something, or somebody, an adult with disabilities, making sure that we're reminding people about our mandated reporter roles before we launch too much into getting the details. So that if something does come out in the sequence that is reportable, we're supporting the family and there's no surprises. They know we need to call and make a report, but ideally we're calling and reporting together. And I find that if you can get the caregiver or the adult who we need to make a report on to make that call themselves, it's really increasing responsibility on them, but then we're supporting them. We're going to come up with a safety plan, etc. Okay. And the other thing we want to gather, when we're doing a sequence of events, we really want to get an understanding. Sometimes I'll see clinicians that'll just start the sequence right when the aggression happened, but usually we want to back up a little bit further and understand the setting events for a sequence. So what was going on before this happened? Did the youth get a good night's sleep? Was anybody using substances? Did people take medications as they were supposed to, those kind of things? Because sometimes if we can intervene much earlier in the sequence, and so it's not uncommon for us to start with things like sleep routines, right? If we can get the youth to sleep better, they're going to be less reactive. If we can get the youth to take medications, they're going to be less aggressive, etc. So we might be thinking we may need to start intervening earlier in the sequence so that this aggression is less likely to blow up in a big way. And the other thing too, I would just say to keep in mind as you're working to gather sequence of events of incidents of aggression is that not everybody's developmentally capable of recalling sequences of events, or they're not always capable of recalling what they were feeling or thinking. And so again, we don't want to make people feel ashamed if they can't recall it. Could be due to substance use, could be due to developmental limitations, etc. that if they don't know, they don't know. So that's why we want to get multiple perspectives to try to fill in the details as much as we can. But if somebody's able to walk through a good cognitive behavioral assessment with you, seeking to understand, like physically, did they experience sensations? How intense was it? Because those might be the places where early on, oh, sorry, let me just cough for a second. Hold on. Sorry, my voice is all scratchy right now. But if we can identify those cues early on that a sequence is getting ready to take off, we can intervene early there and try to interrupt that sequence. And then also thoughts or images going through their mind. Typically, that's more capable of adults or older adolescents that might be able to recall those things. So if mom is thinking, who does he think he is? I'm going to pop him. Okay, that's important to know, right? Like that's once mom's thinking that, we got to go to our safety plan. We got to go to our corners, right? Cool down. And then oftentimes the other thing too, if you're working with an adult who has experienced domestic violence or abuse themselves, um, you know, they could also be experiencing flashbacks. And commonly, when we're working with adolescent males, maybe that this child's father was abusive to mom. And so it's not uncommon, in my experience, to find mom's feeling like, oh my God, he's just like his dad. I'm thinking back to how his dad was, and fight or flight kicks in, right? So, and we can, and I wouldn't explore those things in front of the child. I would explore those things privately with the adult, getting that CBT assessment, so that we can help the adult interacting with the child shift through some CBT skills to be able to cope in such a way, or if that's not possible because they're too activated, just exiting and calling for support, calling their supports to help them cool down so things don't go from 0 to 60. And then we want to get a really good idea of like who did what, who said what, how did they say it, what was their tone, how close were to each other. Um, because usually when I have experienced it, trying to gather sequences of events, you're getting a real surface level like, oh, he went from 0 to 100. I don't know what happened, And so it's really common too for the adults to be ashamed of how they interacted in a sequence of events. And so our non-judgmental approach and persistence in gathering that sequence and getting a good sequence of events, it takes time. So you might get a real basic sequence of events, but then you build on it. So when you're gathering sequence of events, you may very well want to do it in pencil. Um, and then write it out or type it up, but either way people can look at the sequence and kind of make some changes as they go. Very common, the need to slow people down, and if they're really upset, to engage right then in vivo coping skills, to be able to go through the sequence with you, to be able to regulate with you with your support can really be instrumental in helping the sequences change going forward. It's important to not argue over discrepancies, especially if you are gathering sequences of events from, multiple people. They may not agree on everything. That doesn't mean somebody's lying. It may be they don't remember, especially when their fight or flight is all actively engaged. They may not be able to recall very accurately. But let's find some points of agreements where we can have identified choice points that we can try to do something different next time. And then one of the key things will be identifying what each person could try differently in the future. And again, as I reiterated before, engaging the adults who are typically more developmentally capable of, predicting and planning and having a good game plan around changing their sequence with the child. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we have caregivers who have intellectual limitations or are actively substance using. And so we may need to pull in other supports for the child if the parent can't follow the safety plan, for example. But going through, once you've got a good sequence of events identified and written down on paper, like going through and identifying, are there places that each individual could try something different? And I've had clinicians that'll do like little thought bubbles above and like, different color coded mom's colors, this color, youth's colors, this color. And so each person's kind of coming up with what they could try for the next time. And then writing out like, what would we want the script to go like next time in the future when there's a take two? Um, and then we really want to practice that plan. It's not enough to just develop a plan and Godspeed, right? Like, no, we need to build skills so that people can follow plans. And we need to follow up regularly to reassess how is the plan working? Because if oftentimes I'll see like a safety plan developed and then it wasn't reviewed and then a big blow up happens and I'm like, well, did they follow the safety plan? And the clinician sometimes doesn't even remember what's in the safety plan. So really reviewing the safety plan regularly, reviewing that take two plan with the family, that de-escalation plan on a regular basis in sessions is critical. And then the other thing that's really important with youth is to make sure that we're generalizing plans to other settings where they can get aggressive. And as much as possible, trying to get buy-in from those systems, whether it be school or an after-school program, to have a consistent plan across systems. If that's not feasible due to safety and order in the other systems, um, determining in advance what's the modified plan that can work for the youth and making sure we identify adults in those settings that can also support them in utilizing the coping plans that they developed. If the adults don't follow their part of the plan, it's important to meet with them separately and really understand what got in the way and how could we help them be more successful? We definitely don't want to berate them in front of the child, but ideally the parent, through that work with you is able to identify and talk to the child about, all right, you know what, I didn't follow the plan and I'm sorry about that, and I want to follow the plan next time, and here's what I'm going to do to follow the plan. So the parent is taking accountability for their role versus us disciplining the parent in front of the child, which only disempowers them. Um, so I did share with Echo a sequence of events worksheet that I came up with that's just a little prompt for what I just talked about. And then the other resource that I shared as well is a complex trauma facts for caregivers resource that I found helpful to kind of educate parents if they are viewing their child's behavior as bad and disrespectful. And if that child has had significant trauma and that impacts their ability to regulate, etc., that little worksheet I found really helpful to go through with parents to be willing to try a different approach and to view that child as needing support versus being bad. If we can depersonalize the child's behavior, we're much more likely to be successful getting the um, parent to try something new in the sequence. So I want to open it up now for questions and want to get any questions or thoughts that you have about just a little talk there. Clear as mud. Okay. Well, I know you're a very experienced group, so this may seem like, what you do when you're able to intervene in these systems. But let me know. I sent my email, so if anybody has questions, they can also email me as well. And anything come up in the chat, Renee? Okay.
Nope, nothing in the chat.
All right.
Hi, would you recommend visuals as a tool for rewriting? Should that be more helpful? Yeah, I was thinking that
Yes,
as well.
yes. Yes, I think that's really important, so yeah, because I remember one time I had a clinician that was out in she was working with a parent and child and they made a poster, and that was part of session was to make a poster to remind everybody what to do.
Hmm.
And the mom in that case, grandma had to help the mom parent because she had a lower IQ. And so, that was a really developmentally appropriate way to make sure that the family knew the plan. So definitely that's a great point. Yeah. Less writing, the better, so that people are
Hmm.
able to just see it in the moment. Or I've also had people that have, put on their phone screen, like what the plan is and just simple steps. Or on the fridge so that, yeah, you
Hmm.
can just quickly recall it and you don't have to read because who can read when they're, so upset? Unlikely
Yes,
to be able to do that.
yeah, that was
Yeah,
my thought as well. Thank you.
yeah, that's a great point. And the question about where to find the resources, Renee, do those get sent out or are those shared somewhere with participants?
Yeah, so those will be shared by our Neomed friends. Either um, Kara or Jamie will share those afterwards. So the PowerPoint and then those other two resources that you recommended too, which I highly recommend to um, grab those
They're
and say,
they're all up on the iEcho platform for everybody to see.
oh, that's right.
See, Kara's already taken care of it. Perfect.
That's right. We have our new iEcho platform, which is very handy, and all of the great things are there. Yeah. Yeah.
It's on the session for if you're looking for it. Or there's a tab for uh forgive me. I'm forgetting the word.
For content.
Yes, the content. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Thanks, Maureen.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much. It was nice talking with you all, and feel free to contact me if anybody has any questions afterwards. But
Sounds
thank you
good.
very much. I'll leave you to it.
Thanks. All right, folks. So now we're going to shift to our case presentation today.